Okay guys, a video here for working in Photoshop, creating our files in an artboard grid that we'll take and place our images into in Photoshop, and then we can adjust them, and then we'll put them into, we'll export them from Photoshop and put them into InDesign. I'm going to break this up into a couple different videos. So this first part will really just be getting your photos into Photoshop and doing some adjustments, and we'll go from there. So just to recap our conversation from last class about really getting into seeing elements of design, particularly point, line, and plane. We also talked about texture and type as they occur in the world around us, both in just natural manifestations or in the human-made environment. Okay. So, we talked about the fact that especially nowadays with everything so in the palm of our hand, in our face and screens, and it's so easy to miss a lot of the details that go by, and because of that we start to lose our own sense of perspective. We become passive observers versus active makers. And so this first part of learning to get those that, reclaim that ability to see and to notice and to be present in our environment is a crucial step into our introductions into the formal projects for the class. So this first one, how to see, as we mentioned, we're going to be capturing 9 photos. We'll be capturing more photos, and then we're going to end up with 9 each for these 5 elements for the point, line, plane, texture, and type. Okay. Like we talked about before, you want to get those photos. You can take them on your phone, you can take them on a camera, whatever works best. And I would suggest, again, 15 photos to start with at least, so then you could, edit it down to the 9 favorite ones. Take even more if you want. The key thing, first you got to get them from your phone or whatever your device is. If you have a camera, you can typically just plug your camera via USB into your laptop or your desktop, whatever that is, and import the files right onto your computer. If you're taking these on your phone, you can use a sync cable. You can get them into your, maybe you can put them into Dropbox from your phone, or like a Google Photos or some sort of iCloud account if you have an Apple computer. And nice thing about an iPhone is you can use AirDrop, and basically right from your phone you can pop them right into your onto your machine via AirDrop. And there are many different tutorials on those things. So if you want to learn how to use AirDrop, you can check that out online. But the key thing is that once you get them on your computer, you want to make sure that they're organized as clearly as possible. And we talked about a simple file structure here. You have your main project folder, or your main image folder, your original images, and then you have the subfolders for all the point, line, plane, texture, and type. And then within those folders, you will have your imagery. Okay. So let's look at our images here. Some of these you're not going to worry about, a lot of these folders here. These are some of my things. But if I have my original images folder here, and then I have my point, line, and plane, I don't have them totally populated. I'll use type. I have 9 images or 10 images in the type category. That's what I chose to focus on for this. But again, you're going to want to go through, actually I'll move this into type. You're going to want to go through and make sure your images are clearly organized. I didn't name them, because it's just for my purposes here. They don't need to be super specific. But for yours, I might put type 1, type 2, type 3, texture 1, texture 2, etc. in your images here, just so you're always clear as to what the images are. Because if you're just looking at them in a rough numbering system, it's going to be harder to keep track of them over time, especially when you have 45 images in this project folder here. Okay, so again, just to reiterate, when we're looking at the images, what could we be thinking about? I mean, we talked about we can look at photos in a lot of different ways. And we can look at this and use it as, okay, this could be point, actually, if you think about it. These people, in the water, they almost look like they're not even human. This could definitely be texture. It could be plane to a degree, the way these figures are sort of floating in or almost on this ground of the ocean here. You can get into, that's not appropriate, that doesn't work. Not inappropriate, it just doesn't work. Something like this could be line, for example. I mean, it could definitely be texture. I guess it could be plane as well. I'd probably use this for line. And these are images that are way more pulled back. Here's one that could be texture. it could be line, it could be plane for sure. Now, when you're looking at your images after you've shot them, it's going to be, you're going to look at them as the whole image and decide, okay, what do I roughly want that to be, and organize it accordingly. Once you get it into the Photoshop document, because you're cropping everything to squares, things might change just based on the compositional space you have to deal with, okay? So you want to get them into those folders and you know, organize them and also be flexible, because as you bring them into your actual square formats, maybe things are going to change. So for example, let me open up Photoshop here real quick. And the first thing I'm going to do when I open up Photoshop, I'm going to click on File and I'm going to go to New. Okay. Now, for those of you who are new to Photoshop, make sure you approach this, especially if you don't know it well, keep it slow. Don't get impatient. I see a lot of people trying to rush through things and it gets confusing really quickly. It can be overwhelming in the beginning, and that's normal. Okay, so if you're freaking out about it a little bit, it's totally normal. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to go to your new, you're going to File, New. It's going to give you this new document preview. Your custom things here might be very different than mine, but you're going to have the ability to create the size that you want for your page size, okay? And what you're going to want to do is to have these be 2.5 by 2.5. If yours might say pixels here, just go to the drop down and select inches. And you want the resolution to be at 300, because even though we're not doing these print, we do want the resolution to be high enough, because when we make them into PDFs, and if we ever do want to print them, they'll be high enough resolution, okay? 300 pixels per inch is a good a good print-ready resolution. Oftentimes you'll see images at 72 dpi. Those are typically made for on-screen websites, that kind of thing, okay? A quick note on that. If you're shooting on a phone, for example, and you bring the phone image onto your computer and you open it up, if you look at the resolution, it will be 72 pixels per inch, but the image itself will be really huge, typically. And so even though it has a lower resolution, excuse me, it has so much pixel information and pixel depth that you can scale it down while upping the resolution. So, and especially when we bring them into our 300 ppi file, they're going to natively scale, okay? So you don't have to worry about that too much. If this is unchecked here, you're going to want to check on Artboards to make sure you could have the option for adding Artboards, okay? And that's pretty much all you need to do. You're going to hit Create now, okay? And I'm going to open this up, and your interface might look different. Again, I have mine on the lighter gray. Yours might be darker gray. You might have different palettes showing and everything. Again, we don't have to worry about that. If you go to Window and you go to Workspace, you can select from a variety of workspace options. The default is just the Essentials here, and for me, that's fine for right now. Okay. So a key palette to have open is your Layers palette here. And especially as we start to add artboards and everything, that's going to be an important one for you to check out. You can click on these, you can drag them out if you want to, you can close them if you don't need them. Many of these things, for these I'm not going to really even need a lot of these palettes here. Another way to open or close those is to go under Window, and you can click on whatever you want to, you can scroll down and select what you want to have open or close. So I don't want the properties open. I see it's checked. If it's checked, it means it's open. If I click on that, it goes away. Okay. Same thing with channels and paths. I don't really need to worry about those. So I'm gonna, well, they're not even showing me here, so I can just easily pull that out of there and get rid of it, as well as my paths. And again, you don't have to worry about this. I'm sort of doing it for no reason, but here's my history palette. This allows me to go through, and as I move through this document, it'll document and list for me all the actions I've done. I can go through there and undo things. We'll talk about different ways to undo things here. Okay, so right now I have one artboard and it's 2.5 inches square. See, what's interesting now is that this is showing me the size in pixels. So let me do this real quick. I'm going to go to General. I'm going to go to Units and Rulers, actually, my Preferences, Photoshop, Preferences, Units and Rulers. And I want my units to be inches, which is what I asked it to do. But it changed it up on me in here. So now I'm in inches, okay? So if you're here saying like 100, 300, 600, etc., here it's pixels instead of inches, you can change that via Photoshop, Preferences, Units, and Rulers, okay? It's not a big deal for us right now. What I mainly want to do is get myself to add the artboards I need. Again, I'm going to have 9 images for each element, so I'll have 9 artboards in this first file, okay? So this could be my point file, this could be my line or my texture or whatever it is. This, for me, this will be my type file, okay? So what I want to do is I want to add the artboards I need to add. So the way you're going to do, there are different ways to do it. You can add artboards via your palettes, but you can also, this is the easiest way and I find the most effective way to do it, is to click on the artboard name. You got to have your move tool selected, the very top, the topmost tool in your tools palette here. Click on that. Click on the name of the artboard. Okay, when you click on the name, you're going to get these plus signs. And because I want to add artboards in a 3 by 3 across and 3 down, so I have a grid of 9. I'm going to hit this here, plus sign there. I'm going to hit that plus sign there. So now I have my 3 artboards. Okay, I want to add 6 more. So what I have to do, if I keep adding this, using this button, it's going to keep going in a straight line. I want to have this look like a grid so I can get a sense of what my final template will look like with all my images in it. So I go back to my artboard 1, and I'll click on this button here, and it adds artboard 4. So the nice thing is too, it's also keeping it sequential for me. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I click here, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to go back over here, click on that one, and click there, and there. Okay, so now this is essentially my grid, and it will allow me to get a sense of what my images will look like when they're put all together. One thing you're going to notice is in your layers palette, there, all your artboards are there. It didn't, even though I did them sequentially, it has them all funky and out of order here in my palette. It always does that. So for my own purposes here, I'm going to bring them down. If I click on here and I move it down below, I'll order them as I want, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to have them sequentially, okay? And so just click and drag on the layers like this. I know that when you're new, even the simplest things of clicking on things and knowing how to click on them, it can be really frustrating. Just be patient with that, okay? So now I have my artboard, my 9 artboards in my 1 file, okay? And so whenever you want to add an image to one of your artboards, make sure you have your artboard tool selected, and you can click on that artboard, okay? And when you click on the artboard, you'll see it, select the selection window will come up, this bounding box, and it'll also show you in your palette that you're in that particular artboard, okay? So when you're in that artboard, let's say I want to bring in an image from, I'll bring in one of those first images we looked at, so I won't get into my type ones yet because I want to talk a little bit about compositionally how those images can change once you get them into Photoshop. If I go to File, I want to select Place Linked, okay, because I want to have my images in here, but I don't want to have them embedded. If I embed the images in here, this file will be huge. Okay, so if I place the linked file, it places the file in my document, but it's only linked to it. Okay, so the dangerous thing there is you always want to make sure that your images are, again, same like we talked about in our InDesign file. You want to have your images connected to your documents. You always want to have them with you wherever you go, kind of like that luggage we talked about. So I'm going to go to Place Linked. Okay, and like I was talking about earlier, let's say I pick this image because I was interested in it maybe being for line or texture or plane. I'm going to place this in here. And it's going to always scale right into here. It's going to fit into my square. Now again, the reality is this image is huge. It's a larger size image. So when I bring it in here and I scale it, I have room to scale it. I don't want to go too huge with it, but I have room to size it up or down. Okay. One thing that Photoshop, when I scale this image, I used to have to hold the Shift key to scale this proportionally. Now if I do that, it makes it all wonky. Okay, now you don't hold the Shift key in Photoshop to scale. So you just click and drag your corners to scale this image and put it into the position you want in your square. Okay, so you can move this around, okay, and get whatever composition you want. Now, if I wanted to do this for line or for texture, I'm probably going to scale this to the point where I don't see the back of the vehicle. Okay. I'm going to probably pop it in there just like that, and then I'm going to double click, and that would be my texture or my line, okay? If I want to undo that on a Mac, I could just go to Command Z, and I undid my placement. Okay, if I want to bring that back, I go to my history palette here. If I bring this down, you can see that the last thing it did for me is it placed that linked smart object. Well, I placed it, even though I scaled it, it was all one operation that I did. So as soon as I hit Command Z, it was gone. And sometimes that can be super confusing to people. Don't freak out. Go into your history palette and you'll find that same image. Right when I click on this, it's going to show back up. Okay. So if I want to just rescale the image, one thing you can do is click on your artboard and go to Command T. Okay, and that's probably Control T on a PC. Go to Command T, and you're going to get that bounding box again, and then you can scale it back down. Let's say, well, hey, I want to make this into plane instead, which would mean I'd need a little more of that object, and I'm going to double click off of there. And now there's a little more depth in the image. I have this extra. The back of the vehicle creates this separate plane, and now the image changes. Okay, so you can see where within one image, like we said before, you can have a lot of different elements happening, but how you place the image and how you compose it and crop it is going to have a big effect on what it could work best for. Okay, so let's delete that. I'm gonna just click on this with my black arrow and hit delete. Let's get into building my actual file that I want for my type options. One thing I just noticed, and we could have done this when we opened up our file, is that I'm looking at my file is called Untitled1, which means I haven't saved it yet. Not a good idea. So I'm going to hit File Save, which is just Command S or Control S. And I'm going to go ahead and name that Project 1 Phase 00. I'm going to call this one type. Okay, and I'm going to have that to. I'm going to send that to. Let's see. I'm going to go to my desktop. This is going to be obviously very different for you. I'm going to put it in my Project 1 Foundation book here. I'm going to have it in my Phase 0, and I'm going to have it in my original images. Okay, I'm going to have my files with these folders because these are going to be the images that are all my original images will be in here. So I'm going to have this my PSDs in here as well, my Photoshop files. If I wanted to, I could create a separate folder and put Photoshop docs if I want to. It's up to you. And I'm going to hit that. Okay, Photoshop, don't worry about that. Okay, so now I know I'm there. Okay, and we've saved our file. Especially important if you've already gone through and placed a bunch of images here. Okay, so let's go back here. I'm going to go ahead and go to File. I'm going to go to, again, Place Linked. This time I'm going to go into my elements here, my original images folder. I'm going to go to Type. And I'm going to go through here and select which ones I want to work with. Okay, I kind of, I just shot from a book. So ideally what you're doing is you're going around into your world and taking your phone or your camera, whatever it is, and actually shooting some things in the environment. I just had some books lying around my house and decided to shoot those. This one's actually already a square format, so I can decide, do I want to change this? I hit Command T there and scale this up or down. Maybe I want to bring, I always want to watch how the edges look. Do I have good bleeds happening where, it's bleeding off the edges in a nice way and it doesn't have any slivers. I don't love that little thing there, so I might move this down a touch. And if I do that, do I need to have that little corner bleeding, you can see where it's almost like this little matrix of possibilities whenever you move things, okay? I don't mind that there, okay? My image for my first type, I'll call that good in the interest of time here. Okay. Same thing with here. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Place Linked. I'm going to put my next image in there. Okay. Let's do this one, and let's scale this one up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place these, and I'm going to stop this video now. I'm not going to make you watch me do this. But when we come back, I'll have all these files placed in here, and we can get a sense of how it's going to look as a grid of type elements. Okay, so hang tight and stay tuned. Okay, guys, here we are. We're back, and I've placed some images in my grid here in my Photoshop file for type. This is my type Photoshop document. You can see I switched out the first image I put in there. I didn't like the way it was fitting with the other items I had in here. And here, at least we have some sense of continuity or similar aesthetic happening. Even though they're all random, separate pieces, I like the way they fit together okay. And a couple of the other images I placed in here didn't really fit. So I'm fine with this now. So what you'll see is I have all my artboards populated, and in my layers palette, if I look at all my artboards, you can see which image is on each artboard. You can have these closed if you want to, or open. Sometimes you like to see them. You can always open them back up. I like to keep it pretty nice and tight, and I already know what's on what anyway. If I'm going to make any adjustments to an image, then I'm going to want to drop that down and click on the image. So one thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention yet is you'll see here when I click on the artboard, it automatically drops it down. My zoom options, you can see here you have in your palette you have your zoom tool, and you can click and zoom and pull it out, and or you can just click up, have it zoom in, or if you hold Option, you see how that I guess it would be, what is that, Alt on your PC? You'll see that it changes from a plus to a minus, and then that will go out. And on a Mac, on my MacBook, when I I use my two fingers on my trackpad here, my mouse, it moves the document on for me, which is nice. Okay. If I can hit Fit Screen, it fits it onto the screen for me. If I hit Fill Screen, it goes much larger. Fit Screen, 100%. You can see at 100% of the file size, it's pretty big. I want to fit on the screen, so I'm going to have that there, and that's kind of easiest. Or if I want to zoom out, I can hit Z, which gives me my zoom tool, and then I hit Option, and then I just hit one zoom out. And those are the different options you have for zooming in Photoshop. And there are others as well. You can Command plus and Command minus and all that stuff. I just typically use the zoom tool, and I always use shortcuts. So very rarely am I going down here and selecting my tool. I'm going to hit Z typically. And if you hold these, your cursor over these tools, it'll show you what the tool is, and then it will tell you the keyboard shortcut, which is really handy. Okay. The same thing would be for the Move tool here. That's V. So let's say I have my zoom tool. All I got to do is hit V, and I'm back to my black arrow on my Move tool. Okay. So that's just a nice kind of simple way to toggle back and forth. I have my images here. One thing that's cool about setting up your artboards like this is you can go through and adjust each image separately. You can see like this image is feeling pretty good. It has enough vibrance to it. I'd say the same is true for, this is a little dark. This one looks pretty good to me, but several of these need a little bit of help. Particularly this middle row, they look a little dark and a little muted. Okay, so if I click on that, whatever artboard I want to adjust, let's go back to this one here. I want to go into my image here, and if I'm on this artboard, okay, what I can do is I can go down into my palette here. You'll see this little button here. It looks like a half moon or something. And you can go to Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. This is going to allow me to adjust this image just for this particular artboard, and it's going to do it in a non-destructive way, which means I'm not permanently altering the photo. I'll be able to go back and either undo it or very easily or add to it or whatever I want to do. So there are a lot of options in here, and I very rarely use all of them. The ones that I'll typically use the most are my levels and my curves. Sometimes the exposure, if you've taken photo classes or you are a photographer and you know Photoshop well, or you know Lightroom, for example, these terms are all very familiar to you. They're essentially darkroom terms. This is all, Photoshop is essentially a digital darkroom, even though we use it for much more than that nowadays. But essentially what I typically start to do is I'd go to my levels, and I'm going to double click on, well, here's what it's doing. It's bringing this here for me. But because I'm on my laptop here, so I have a little bit less room to work with. I'm going to have my document. This little thing will, you can click on that to give you a little foundation. And then depending on how you slide, in which direction you slide here, these are your blacks, your darker tones. You have your whites, and then you have your middle grays, your mid-tones. You can lighten up if you want to. You can adjust accordingly to where it feels like it's going to be where you want to get it. Okay, so with the levels, I mean, I'll typically keep them, this is a histogram here. I'll kind of keep them at the edge, the ends of the right where the little dunes or the little mountains start. I might go for this one, I might go all the way to this larger bump here. And this is very non-technical. I mean, if you know photo terms, you're ahead of the game. But I'll start there. Then I might go back to that, and then when I'm still on that same artboard, I'll go to, let's see, I don't want to go to selective color. I'll go to I can go to vibrance to start out too, and I'll go up my vibrance, and I'll start to see it changing there. If I hit saturation, it's going to bring the color up or down, right? It's going to make it go to either gray, or it's going to really make the color much more vibrant. You know, you can decide how intense you want to take that. Again, the key to remember is because we're just doing this via PDF, it's going to essentially be screen view. This would alter a lot based on whether or not you're printing it. That's going to have a big difference. So the printed version versus our on-screen version, those are two different worlds. But for our needs here, if I make it vibrant on screen, that's really ultimately what we'll be looking at. So I'm cool with that. I'll close out of there. So now in this artboard here, this artboard 4, I have my image, and I didn't do anything with selective color, so I'm going to delete that. I have these two tweaks that I made. If I click off of, I turn them off, this is my original image, and this is it with those adjustments I've made, okay? So you get the drift there. Let's go to this one now. Let's close that one. And let's go to this artboard, and while I'm clicking on the artboard here, I'm going to go back to my adjustment levels here. I'm going to go to, I'll go to my curves, for example. I can start to adjust my curves accordingly, okay? And even if you don't know exactly what these things do, if you're not familiar with the darkroom, you can just eyeball it and explore. Okay, so I probably just push these things around with gut and eye more than have any sort of clear set idea of what I want to do. So that's totally fine. If you want to keep tweaking, you don't want to overdo it. There's a fine line between making good adjustments and going too far. A lot of times people will use brightness contrast and they'll overuse it. Sometimes it is handy, so I want to add a little brightness here. That's fine. That works well, but just don't overdo it. Contrast, if you go too crazy, I mean, that for our purposes on screen it might look good. Too little starts to look a little washed out. But use your judgment, use your eye here, okay? So those are your adjustment layers. And again, the cool thing is if you want to undo them, you can just simply click off of them, or you can delete the adjustment layer altogether by just hitting delete, by selecting on the adjustment layer and hitting delete, okay? And then all of a sudden I go, oh man, wait a minute, I want those back. I can go to Command or Control Z and bring those back, or I could go back into my history palette and, go back to any step I want that I've already done, okay? And that's, you can find history under just window and history, okay? So let's say I've gone through this and I have them all adjusted and they're vibrant and they're doing exactly what I want them to do. I'm going to hit save, okay? And now I want to export these images. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to go to Artboards to Files. So I want them to export as separate files. And if I do it as artboards to files, I get this option here. It might, I don't know where it'll default in yours. If it defaults to include overlapping areas, I would not check that because that's going to essentially do the whole image, and we don't want that. We want the cropped images. We've taken all this time to crop them and place them. I'm just going to have the artboard content only, okay? I don't have any background elements, so you can check that or not. It doesn't really matter. And you're going to want to figure out where you want it to go to, right? So first of all, I'm going to find out where I'm sending it to. I'm sending it to my Photoshop docs. I'm going to have these go. So these are my original file, my original images, so I don't necessarily want to do that, okay? I could put my new images in a separate folder in here, but what I would likely do is create a whole separate folder for this, okay? Because these are my original images. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my project. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to make a folder called, we'll call it Exported Cropped Images, okay? And I would make sure to name this P1 Phase 0. How did I do it over here? I think it's Phase -00. And then exported cropped images, okay? All right, so now I'm going to make a new folder in that, and that's going to be my type folder. I'm going to name it number 5 type because that's going to, I like it point, line, plane, text, or type, so I'm going to name it number 5, and I'm going to hit type for that folder, and I'm going to have all those files export to that. Okay, and I'm going to hit run. You're going to see your computer's going to get glitchy and weird. It's going to freak you out. Don't let it freak you out. This is normal. Artboards of files was successful. Very cool. So now I go into here. I have my cropped images folder, my deal here, and you can see all my images are ready to go. Okay? So that's the export. Our next video will be talking about how to take these exported images and bring them into your InDesign document. Okay? That'll be a separate video. If you have any questions on this, get a hold of me, and we'll get into the next phase here shortly.